open the session so I'm Megan Shaw. I'm the festival producer. And over the past kind of 10 days, we've been running lots of events and activities, engaging people with the amazing world of science and curiosity, from TV programs to events like this, panels, talks, workshops. We made a magazine, and this is one of our last events of the festival. So our festival has been running for 6 years, and we're very much focused on community engagement and working with our local communities in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. We're all about taking science out of the lab and into people's everyday lives, where they can interact with it and interrogate it and ask questions, and feel confident in asking those questions and wanting to be part of the answer. Over the last kind of year or so, we've been developing our plan for trying to ensure that the festival actively seeks to address kind of racial equality or racial inequality in our society broadly, but also specifically within Nottingham. And we're very much learning as we go and understanding that we need to work very closely with stakeholders within education, within universities, within public engagement, and with our communities as well, to achieve a world where science is better for being more diverse and more inclusive and more equitable. So this event is part of that, bringing people together to have a conversation, and I'll be in the audience with other members of our festival board as well, to listen to our contributions and to see how we can move forward. So I'll hand over to Vanna very soon. First of all, just want to remind you that all of our festival events, we want them to be open and safe spaces for people to engage. So please use inclusive language in the chat, and be respectful of other people. The second thing is, yes, you can use the chat to interact with each other, but you can also use the Q&A function. So if you have questions for our panelists throughout the session, please do put them in there. It makes it easier for us to kind of sift them through rather than being in the chat. And I think that's kind of everything. If you won't be able to see us, we won't be able to see you, but we can. That's how we can engage with you best. If you want to pin anybody while they're speaking, that also helps things work well too. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Havana, who's going to be our chair for this evening's event. She's a student at the University of Nottingham, and is the co-chair of the Nottingham City Youth Cabinet as well. So I'll hand over to Havana.
Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to the Diversity in STEM event hosted by the 2021 FOSAC, so Festival of Science and Curiosity, for those who still unaware. I, Havana, will be your chair today of this panel. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm originally from London, but I moved to Nottingham for university, as Megan has just said. My science background is in nutrition, and I'm a member of the Nottingham City Youth Cabinet. And I'm very passionate to inspire people and particularly encourage young people to engage with their community and develop themselves. So with us today, we have a selection of like-minded individuals with not only careers in the STEM field, but also extensive experience with programs that challenge the diversity in the field in many sectors. And they create programs that inspire from the grassroots with our young people. So each of our guests today will have different experiences, and hopefully they will share that with you today. But something we're all commonly acknowledge is the colour of our skin, and cultural heritage often influences the type of experiences we have. And diversity is not only something to be celebrated and enjoyed with cultural holidays or events, but also in the field of work. Innovations result from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's what STEM stands for. And it has the power to improve the lives of anyone from any walk of life. But when the team of experts that work on these new ideas don't fairly represent the world population, how can we expect these innovations to be reflective and therefore benefit the great expanse of the human population? And that's what we're here to talk about today. That's why FOSAC has brought to you these guest speakers, and our participants that I hope you will join in to hear some thought-provoking words, to get inspired, and then develop some strategies and policies, actually create some actionable change to maximize the inclusivity in this brilliant field of work that is STEM. So what we are going to begin with first is a brilliant keynote speech from Maria Arruda. So just to give you a little background, she is the chair of the University of Nottingham's Black and Asian Minorities Staff Network. She holds a BSc and a PhD in pharmacology from the State University of Rio de Janeiro. So just there, we have someone that's come from Brazil, which is very diverse and new, something that loads of you might not interact with. So she's also a senior lecturer. She chaired the academic department for the pharmaceutical arm of the Brazilian Ministry of Health. And that led up to her coming to University of Nottingham, where she shared some of the great programs that are happening in Brazil to increase the inclusivity in amongst the science field, but also to encourage children from a very young age to get involved and even interested in the world of science. So I'm really excited for what she's going to share with you today. I won't say much more, and I will let her take the stage. Oh, you're still on mute, Maria.
Thank you so much, Havana. And I will try now to share my screen, and hopefully it will go fine. I think that, so please bear with me. But I've done a very kind introduction. So I'm not a senior lecturer anymore. I'm now a research development manager here at the University of Nottingham. So it's, as I've got two screens, they are fighting with each other. But I'm confident that we are going to make it happen. So if I share my screen. So can you see a PowerPoint? Can you see a PowerPoint here, Havana? Yeah. So let's see if it works. So what can you see? It's in full screen?
Yes, I can see full screen.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, Havana, Megan, Rick, all involved in the organization of the Nottingham Festival of Science and Curiosity. That is, we are so proud to be in a city as vibrant, as multicultural, and as research intensive as Nottingham is. So it's a real delight to be part of this and to discuss with you. It was a bit of a soul searching to think of this presentation, what I would present to you today. So they are more my reflections about diversity in STEM. And later on, if you've got the chance, I'm very happy to talk about the programs, and particularly the program that we started here in Nottingham. So my colleague, Dr. Sarah Slay, and then with Kat Hart, our project manager, we started today. Today was the launch of the Excel in Science. That is a science program for undergrads at the School of Life Sciences of the University of Nottingham. But here I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I think about research and science and diversity in science. So first of all, there is a disclaimer. So just like on TV, on BBC, there might be images that the viewers might find disturbing. So, you can close your eyes, and then when it's over, I will let you know. So the first image is not too bad. And I started to think the concept of being a historical accident when I first did a stand-up act here in Nottingham at the Rough Trade with other fellow scientists. And that's a caricature from the late 18th century about the slave trade. So I can't forget that everything I say comes with the premise that I am the descendant of someone that was taken hostage and treated like this did the big crossing from Africa to Brazil. And I am quite sure that the people involved in the slave trade, they had no intention for any of the descendants of these people to become scientists. And that's the same thing for any marginalized group in history. So we are not supposed to be in science. However, science is inclusive per se, but the people are not always very inclusive. And that's why the debate of today is so important. So now it's over. You know, having this premise didn't stop me from having an incredibly happy, fulfilling life, both in Brazil and in UK. And I know that just from this aspect, I am a minority of the people that share the phenotype that I present, that look like me. I'm the minority of these people. And the minority of the people in Brazil, a country with 56% of the population being Black, a population of over 220 million inhabitants, 56% of this population is Black and totally marginalized and excluded historically from the higher education system, therefore from science. My mom, she's got a motto that, you know, the best form of activism is being where we are not supposed to be. And I took it for life. So I reached places, not because I'm amazing, but I had a fantastic upbringing. I had access to great education, and I could fulfill my love from a very young age for science. I was exposed to science, and people told me that it would be possible to be a scientist. But then when my daughter, she was doing, you know, A levels, and she was about to go to university, and she in Manchester, in where she ended up studying, and she's finishing her philosophy degree this year with Arthur Lewis. That was the first Afro-Caribbean or person of African descent to win a Nobel Prize, in his case, in economics. I started to think that, you know, surviving is not enough. We've got generations to come, and we want these generations to be included and loved and embraced by science. So it was really a turning point. You know, it was a moment that I realized that, you know, I had an amazing time in research that some people call proper science, that I thought it was time to change. And there was another change promoted by my daughter being exposed to this world that I knew from experience that was so, still so, so hindered by institutional racism. Toni Morrison, she says that, and she passed away, unfortunately, but she says, because she's still here with us through her work of art, through her writing, that the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being there. You know, somebody says you don't have a language. Somebody says you are not shaped properly. Somebody says that you have no kingdoms. And I'll say that for race because it's something that is closer to me. That's a protected characteristic that I embody. And I'm a woman as well. But I think that for every protected characteristic, the prejudice has this very serious function of distraction. There is someone that I think that the only parallel, maybe the political views, but the hair, they both had, you know, gray hair, and I'm approaching, you know, the same look. I want to look like Toni Morrison and Karl Marx soon. And Marx, he says that we know only a single science, the science of history. So to understand why science is like that, why higher education is like that, and despite the number, you know, increasing slowly of, you know, people from different, from different um, sexual orientations, different ethnicities, different genders. Despite all that, we're still hindered in this big thing, this elephant in the room that is the lack of diversity in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and medicine. And I had the chance last year to host this fantastic debate with colleagues from the University of Connecticut and our professor, Cecile Wright, on is a university colonial, and trying to understand in a first stage the past of the university. And this discussion brought things that we know, that the colonialism caused epistemological murder. And these are the basis of our higher education and of a lot of our research institutions, because the universities are the birthplace of colonial and then imperial administration. They were taken to other countries like the US, like Brazil, like the Caribbean islands, and then to the East and Far East to educate the people that would administer the empire. That was the reason. So it's a place that was conceived with exclusion by design. Angela Saini, in her book Superior, brings this perspective as well. The return of the race science, and she makes a very interesting historical perspective of it. And just like I think anyone here in this panel, hopefully not so much for the younger ones, I'm very old, I realized, I felt it in my skin, because in a previous life, I was an awardee of the L'Oréal Prize for Women in Science. And in Brazil, where I was still based, the only thing that they could, the media could think about, they saw a woman in a lab, oh, but something happened. Somebody one day thought that she was a samba dancer, and that's what they came to say, oh yeah, she's a scientist, but people think that she's a samba dancer. I'm going to use the 15 minutes, Havana, so my apologies. So I'm going to plow to do it very fast now. So racism, misogyny kills. The writer Caroline Criado Perez in 2019 created, a big storm with her book, Invisible Woman, telling a number of truths that we all know really well, but it was good to have systematized in a book. So the world is designed and still designed for Caucasian male people from European or North American descent. That's the world. That's how the world was designed. And interestingly, that's less than 9% of the world population. Women in science, we are only 28.8%, despite being half of the world population, more than half actually, as we all know. And it's not an issue of the developing world. That's, in North America and Western Europe, 32.3% of the people are in science are women. So it's interesting, because if you stop to think, we've got here a reason why malaria and other diseases of the developing world, for example, that that are horrendous, that it was supposed to be treated, ages ago, they didn't disappear. But we've got a fantastic solution for erectile dysfunction, for example. So we need to think about these things when we think of the role of science, because science itself might be impartial, but the people that do science, that promote science, that fund science, are just people like you and me. So their beliefs and their views of the world impact how we are going to to enjoy the fruits of this science. And diversity is life. You know, when you think of all the biomes across the world, any 6-year-old child knows that the more diverse, the more resilient, the better these landscapes, these ecosystems are. Why can't we use this because I am a bit tired of saying that, oh, we need to have diversity in science because diversity in science is the right thing to do. I'm a bit tired of it. We need to have diversity in science because the very sustainability of this system relies on diversity. We are going to perish as a scientific community and as humanity if we carry on dampening diversity. You know, another example, the green deserts, you know, people thought that, okay, we cut all the trees, it's horrible, let's just plant loads of eucalyptus here. This approach is a green desert. And I think that's what happened when they want to put loads of people from different backgrounds, but through a mode, and they need to be exactly the same. So you only prosper if you act the same way. There is this very interesting paper of the diversity innovation paradox in science, and it's well proven that we need diversity. Yeah, not we need, that diverse groups, or more explicitly, students, PGR, postgraduate students from diverse backgrounds, women, it was in US, so Latins. I'm finishing now, really fast. They, you know, they are more innovative, but their innovation is discredited by their superiors. So finishing here, we've got complex scenarios from everything from the climate change, plastic in the ocean, violence against women, hunger, that are very aligned with the sustainable developmental goals. We are only going to be able to reach these goals and be a more prosperous society if science is more diverse. So the take-home message here is start where we are, you use what we have, and do what we can. Ivana, apologies for taking too long, 15 minutes, 36 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think everybody would agree that that was really insightful and took us on a really good understanding of why we are where we are now and what needs to happen for us to develop and change. And that's what we're here to talk about, and what we're all inspired and encouraged to do. So thank you for that, Maria. Without further ado, we'll move on to the discussion. So I hope all our panelists are ready. If you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras to get ready to respond. I'll begin with the first topic, which is early intervention. And the main question here is, how does early intervention contribute to diversity in STEM? So our panelists will probably have quite a answer to respond with, maybe that they've planned. If any of you want to come forward.
Would it be good just to do some introductions before we answer the question, so we know who we...
How can I forget? I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I completely skipped that. Okay, my apologies.
Straight into the question.
Should we begin with the introduction of our panelists? So I will go first with Anita Shervington. She is our brilliant Blast Fest founder. She's a science capital pioneer and a science and cultural organizer and engagement strategist. Anita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. Good to be here. So what can I add to that? So my background is in community development and community organizing. I'm based in Birmingham, And the background of work is always been about equity and community empowerment and working across different areas, including health, particularly nutrition and maternal nutrition specifically, but also women's empowerment and civic participation and arts and culture. And really that fusion is what makes up my approach to STEM engagement and through the work that I do through BLASTfest. So ultimately it's about creating environments where communities can see themselves, be themselves and become themselves. And yeah, nice to be here. And I'll pass it on to the next panelist.
Thank you, Anita. Next, we have Councillor Leslie Ayula. He's a councillor for Nottingham, in case you didn't know. He works in the Regeneration, Business Growth and City Centre Management. And he's also founder of a Creative Quarter, which is a non-profit for economic development. And he's a key coordinator for Black Pound Day, for those of you who that know about that campaign. So Councillor Leslie, if you'd like to further introduce yourself.
Thank you, Havana, for your introduction. Just a point of correction, I'm not the founder, one of the founders of Creative Quarter. I sit on the Creative Quarter board as a representative of Nottingham City Council, but I am one of the founders of Be Global, which is Nottingham's Black Business Association, which works around supporting Black businesses, but works with a wider BAME community. So just as a point of correction. But yeah, just quickly, my background, I've been a local councillor for around about 5-6 years now. First got elected in 2015 and then again in 2019. But I grew up in Nottingham, so I'm born and bred. Didn't grow up with the greatest amount of wealth, but I grew up with a cultural wealth from my father, who's a Nigerian man, who's very, on one, entrepreneurial, and two, takes education very, very seriously. And my basically understanding and passion for getting into the STEM subjects is that I'm not I haven't got a great expertise, but I've got a great knowledge of learning. And my knowledge of learning was given to me by a chap called Baba George, who taught us African history, probably in like the early 1990s or so, and basically taught me everything about where history stems from, the ancient civilizations of Kemet, which is known as present-day Egypt. Basically, the first civilizations on the face of the earth were Black Africans. And from there, you get people like Imhotep, which characterized on Hollywood in TV, but who was not necessarily, as other people say, like Einstein was the first genius, but Imhotep was known as a multi-genius, somebody who basically had expertise in a range of fields. And so that stemmed and started my interest in understanding African history, where science has actually come from, the achievements of ancient Egypt, which stemmed along and then was passed down the line through other civilizations. So when you look at medicine, when you look at things like Pythagoras' theorem, it wasn't necessarily the Greeks who created it. The Greeks learned that from ancient Africans and brought that into Greece, and that spread across the world. So it's always good to know your history, and funny enough, when it comes down to education, the present government, I don't want to be party political, but it's always good to understand your history, one, where you're coming from, and understanding why people may want to create a different narrative around history. Instead of saying it as it is, there are challenges, and I think we've got to be honest about that. And just like in the business world, is that when you get to a stage where you've got a great diversity in your business and in your organization, evidence shows that once you get to that level, businesses start to thrive more when they have a diverse workforce. So I don't want to go on too long, but
thank you for that, Councillor Leslie. That again, very insightful piece of history that I've been raised on, been taught by my father. So it's nice to hear that you're also bringing that to the panel this evening. Next up, I would like to introduce Hasmita Chavda. She is Head of Programs and Impact at Business Launchpad and a leader in young entrepreneurship support. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, thank you, Havana. So yeah, as I said, I'm the Head of Programs and Impact at Business Launchpad, but also with different hats. I also sit on the board of Nottingham Festival of Science and Curiosity, and I'm a trustee of Ignite. I also helped the first Festival of Science and Curiosity in Nottingham happen with the great work of kind of a lot of the partnerships within Nottingham. That's definitely a kind of a career highlight and joy for me. And one of the reasons that I'm here, and I guess I'm here to kind of speak about, is around kind of the opportunities for creating kind of curiosity-led learning in spaces for young people and their families actually as well. So actually, how are we ensuring that people feel that they have, again, like the stake and the say in the science that's happening around them, and are being able to inform that, as well as feeling that they're able to be the ones to create that? And how do we start planting those seeds kind of quite early on too? So, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for that, Hasmita. And next, I'd like to introduce Mustafa Sakar. He's Associate Professor in Sport and Performance Psychology in the School of Science and Technology at NTU, and he also does really great work with the BAME community of staff. So if you'd like to further introduce yourself, Mustafa.
Thanks, Havana. So as Havana mentioned, yeah, Associate Professor in Sport and Performance Psychology. So I guess from a STEM point of view, I come from it mainly from a social sciences background rather than a kind of a, I guess what you might call kind of the traditional or hard sciences. So yeah, my research predominantly looks at the psychology of performance excellence, predominantly in the sport context, but also in other high performance domains such as business. And I've also got an interest around, or specific interest around performance excellence, around resilience. So specifically within the School of Science and Technology, I'm chair of the school's resilience working group, which is specifically aimed at developing resilience, not only in students, but also in academic staff as well. And in terms of my kind of background, I guess I would kind of identify as a British Asian. I've got an Indian kind of heritage, and also someone from an Islamic faith as well. So yeah, very, very happy to be here and look forward to the kind of conversations.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. And last but not least, we have Dr. Adekunle Dosumu. He's a bioscience lecturer in the School of Science and Technology at NTU. He's a specialist in environmental sciences. He's also a certified speaker, mentor, and coach, offering workshops, seminars, keynote speaking, and coaching to aid in personal and professional growth to individuals, organizations, and companies worldwide. Please take it away, Dr. Adekunle. Oh, I don't know if you're on mute there, but
Havana, I don't think Ade has been able to join us this evening.
I thought he was in the part. My apologies. Okay, so unfortunately we can't hear from him, but as you can hear from his introduction, he's quite a figure in the world of STEM and encouraging people to, from a young age, to be inspired by the field.
Oh, you're on mute.
Without further ado, I think it would be okay to begin with the discussions, if that's okay with everyone. Yeah? Okay, so early intervention. How does early intervention contribute to diversity in STEM? Who would like to begin speaking?
I'll go. Yeah?
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so just to, now that I've heard everybody else's introductions, just to add to that as well, I do science engagement, but I don't have a science background. And so if I think back into what brings me to be interested in the whole STEM agenda, it's very much from my background working in health and wanting to improve the social determinants of health, which I think everything fits underneath: where we live, work, play, what we have access to, our environment, social and otherwise, and really wanting to improve that, and recognizing that, you know, the STEM agenda can really be used towards that on many different levels, including the grassroots. And so obviously in terms of early intervention, and we're thinking about young people and their pathways into science, for example, that's about, you know, early exposure. And where do we get our exposure to anything from? It's our families, our holding environment, the village. And I think that, I mean, there's a number of things that have already been said earlier on by Maria and other people. For me, I have two daughters. They're now 20 and 23, but when they were in primary school, I was really concerned. So I came at this from a concerned parent point of view, concerned about the environment that I was able to create for my children in terms of role models, access to opportunities and that kind of thing, and noticing that actually there was a desert when it came to STEM opportunities. So this is way back, and things have improved since then. And of course, we're all part of that improvement. But there was a school, an out-of-school program, an organization called iShango. And it was originally developed by the amazing Elizabeth Rasicola. And it ended up being that there were these iShango clubs across all of the main cities that had a lot of ethnic diversity. And it was aimed at African Caribbean children, recognizing that there was not, you know, the role models, the access opportunities, there were not enough of those things, and that parents really wanted them. And crucially, that they wanted a culturally responsive approach to science education. And so finding the iShango Science Club was an amazing thing for me. And I signed up my children, and they used to go twice a week on Saturdays, and also one of the evenings in the week. And so as a, you know, from a parent perspective, for me, it was about how do I expose them to something, again, where they can see themselves, be themselves and become themselves. The school was very much designed around their cultural needs, recognizing some of the things that we heard about earlier in terms of history, where we're coming from, and the inequitable, racially exclusive environment that we live in. And they were trying to create this, this special environment for people like my children. And so a lot of my inspiration comes from that. So I'll let somebody else speak now.
Thank you for that, Anita. That's really quite personal experience that you shared with us. And I'm glad you did. Maybe some people here can relate to that, and maybe even go and look for a similar organization to help some young people they know. Hasmita, did you want to come forward and talk about your work in the early intervention sector?
I guess just a lot of, I think what Anita said, actually, without like repeating too much of it, is there is about just that, what are some of those opportunities that we create right at the beginning? Like, we know young people are thinking about their careers before they're in secondary school, yet the experiences that they're usually exposed to, especially if the families don't engage in science, or, you know, the only routes that are like typically maybe shown are around like, you know, being a doctor or being this like vague quote unquote scientist. Whereas, you know, you start exploring this a little bit more, and there's a fusion, you know, or they're kind of told that they can't do art and science. And actually we know there's loads of careers that fuse different principles and different disciplines. But I think also that there's this element that science is taught as being something that you're, where you can't ask questions, you just need to learn all the facts. And there's something really beautiful about early intervention where you can also infuse kind of like this idea of like wonder. And there's a lot of the work that we've done, I've had an opportunity to, with both Ignite, but also the great work that I see with kind of the festival, is it inspires the sense of kind of like wonder, like what if? Like, I think one of the things that came on like Wilton Watch was like, you know, what if humans had tails? And that's this element of kind of like imagination. It's around like curiosity, and these are the things that kind of change and shift the world and move things forward. However, like I don't think we encourage young people especially to do this enough, and to use their imaginations, to be playful, to kind of continue this thought of like wonder of like what if, and to merge that. And I think that, and also like with those investigations, then therein lies the opportunity for science to occur. And I came in from like, and just to kind of touch on like, and sort of, my background isn't necessarily in STEM. I kind of grew up thinking that maybe I wanted to be a doctor, and then realized that it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do. However, I had the opportunities when I was in secondary school kind of imposed that things are quite like multifaceted, and I didn't just have to be one thing. I could use like this playful side of me that I have with science. I think that opens up more doors to kind of, yeah, to wonder and to excitement, and to actually the science that I think can really like change the world that we see kind of in front of us. But as also Maria said, like a lot of that science at the moment is done through a very similar lens, and it's very much done through kind of like a white male lens, where and we're seeing that right now for even things like algorithms in code and on Instagram, and everything that we're consuming that's also tech based is geared and created without taking in kind of these other cultural lenses that we need to access it, but also to make it I guess something that is equitable and that we can all use. So we'll link into that. I think early intervention is really important for these kind of future things, and you need to sow the seeds quite early.
Thank you. That again was really good to share. Could I also ask from our panelists what you say the role of academic institutions are, so going a bit forward from the ground roots when they're really young, maybe primary school, secondary school, when they then push into further education, into higher education, where do you see the influence of diversity either having a benefit or not so much of a benefit on the participation of people from a BAME community in this field? I don't know if Maria or Mustafa, you want to come forward and speak from your university background.
Yeah, I can give you a bit of a perspective on this. I come from, as you know, my thick accent shows you that I'm from somewhere else. And I told you I'm from Brazil. I've been in a lab since I'm 14 years old. So constantly, because in Brazil, we've got something called technical high schools. So other countries like Germany, they have very similar things, isn't it? So kids that, have that sense of wonder that Hasmita told us about, and, had the chance of being exposed to projects or through their parents or the community, like Anita said, they say, yeah, science is something I want to do. So that's, and I think that's something crucial, because I've got friends that finished the technical high school with me and became lawyers. So it's not like determining that they are going, but they had the chance to experiment this. We don't have it here. And there is this person in Brazil, very prominent researcher that gave a lot of money to a program called Scientific Initiation. When he was like fundraising for the program, well, liaising with the government, he used to say, you don't find a Pelé, that is the Brazilian footballer. You don't find what's his name, Marcus Rashford, for here. You don't find them when they are 25 years old, do you? You find them when they are really, really young. Nobody decides to play football when they are 25. And that's what we do with people in this country. You don't give them the opportunities to show that they can do it. It's beyond exposing the student. And we discussed it before, the higher education system is changing, and we are all here agents of this change, but it's changing slowly. It can be so crushing for students that don't come from affluent, overrepresented backgrounds. So that's a bit of what Sarah, Lee, and I were trying to do at the University of Nottingham with the Excel in Science, is to give people the opportunity to see research, to understand research, to understand the craft, because there is a craft. There is the beauty of it, but there is a craft that you need to know how to do it. You need to see what is involved, and I think that in this transition from secondary school to the first years of the university, I think that's the sweet spot for research. And if we check anyone from any, because when I think of sciences, Mustafa was saying of the social science, I think of the whole spectrum, because we are all, particularly today that everything needs to be interdisciplinary. It's the sweet spot, between 16 and 2021. That's when the person is going to have a fantastic experience, serendipitously, that's going to put them into the scientific pathway. So I'm very much into discussing, with all of you, how we can, how we can create opportunities for this sweet spot for the scientific life.
Thank you. Could you explain maybe a couple of things that Excel in Science is doing as a means to act out exactly what you're saying? So maybe a couple of the features that we've done.
So yeah, of course. So it's the name in Brazil is scientific initiation. So you initiated to the scientific practice. So I think I can see here some students that started today the regular course before. So they do, in Nottingham, we've got the Nottingham Advantage Award, and other universities. So it's extracurricular activities that convert in brownie points in your CV in the end. So we had one term of talks, and then people would come if they wanted to. And then there is the formal term, that is the formal module of the Excel in Science. And what we are trying to do, so Sarah and I were working really, really hard to create opportunities for students for the second and third year at university to spend time in the lab, because there is a very specific and practical side of things as well. Many people, they can afford to do some internships or things like that without being paid. What is, is something wrong, because if we open the doors for these people, we are excluding even more. And the students, away from home, they need to survive, isn't it? So why not, instead of working Sainsbury's, why not working in the lab, as a junior research assistant? So that's the second stage of the science, of what we want to, we want it to be the second stage, and we are raising funds for this, to be able to get students into the lab, doing research, pipetting or crashing numbers or doing surveys if they are in the social science. That's what we want to do.
Thank you. That's a real practical program that's going on. Just quickly, because I'm conscious of time and I want to get on to the next topic. We've got a great question here that says, is there an ideal age or age group for which early intervention to encourage STEM interest is best? So Maria, I remember you saying that transition from secondary school into maybe like a college or sixth form, that's where you see it being a prime age to really capture the curiosity of a young person. Does anybody else from their experience, just in engagement with young people in general, have any insight into what that good age group or age specifically you feel is best?
I can probably just jump in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, part of my past career was being a voluntary and community sector youth and development worker. So when working with children and young people, I would probably say that there's no really early age. It's right from the beginning. So anything what stimulates a child's mind, from toys, from things that they can see, places that they can go, that's all a part of their learning environment. So I can remember, doing programs with quote unquote disadvantaged young people from areas of St. Anne's. Then we took them to the biggest allotment within Europe, which is actually in St. Anne's, and just got them to explore the allotment, explore what was around them, which they've lived in that area all their lives, but never attended there. And these were obviously primary age children, etc. So I don't think there's a early age. It's right from the beginning. But I think one thing that we as organisations got to do is create those structures for us, for our children, young people to get involved in. Graham Allen, who was a past MP, focused on something called early intervention. So basically, this emphasizes class as an issue. So obviously those people in middle class, upper class, who've got the greatest amount of wealth, their children can explore and have those those benefits, while people from working class backgrounds don't necessarily have those capabilities. So we really need to understand class involved in that, and make sure that we're creating those opportunities for young people to get involved, because they're our future, and they're the ones will be able to provide some of the challenges that we're facing now as adults.
Thank you again for that, Councillor. That leads quite well into the next topic. Do we have any questions before we move on, or anything our panelists would like to add to that specific topic of discussion?
Can I just kind of add in relation to just to the role of the academic institution, just in relation to what Nottingham Trent are doing. So I guess one thing that we have identified across the university, and specifically within our school, is there is an issue where Black and ethnic minority students aren't progressing and aren't attaining as well in comparison to kind of other groups. And I think that's something that universities are now taking very, very seriously, with kind of success for all as an agenda and widening participation. I guess what I feel universities now need to do is, we've identified this as a bit of an issue, but we now need to think about what we can actually do in practice. And I think that's where the kind of some of the gaps are, is we know this is an issue, but what can we now do actually in reality and practice? And just a few ideas that I just thought was, I think one area that we've recognized is the importance of role models, particularly in terms of mentors and people within Black and ethnic minority communities can actually relate to. So something, we have a mentoring system in our personal tutorial system, but a lot of the mentors tend to be of white Caucasian background. So I think we need to have a more diverse set of role models, so actually people can relate to people a little bit better in that particular context. And then the other area that we've identified as well that seems to be an issue is that sense of community. And when people can't kind of relate to, that could be to do with the curriculum, that could be to do with university networks, whatever that kind of might be. So I think role models and a sense of community is certainly something that the universities are starting to look at, in terms of that kind of, not just ensuring diversity is in there in the first place, but actually then when people do go on to take STEM subjects, they actually progress and they actually do well in those particular areas. So I think that's another issue as well. It's not just getting people into STEM subjects, but when they get into STEM subjects, getting them to progress and do well.
Thank you. That's a really good point that you made there, and something that I would encourage all our participants here to engage with, is that this isn't just a discussion. What we want to do here is encourage the development of policies and changes that any one of us can make, whether it's in our own small little communities, or whether you work part of bigger organizations, whether you're a stakeholder. It's the fact that we want you to take away these experiences and take away these ideas and try and implement that into your institutions and your environment, that would then contribute to the great diversity in STEM that we all agree is needed. So we'll go on to the next topic of discussion, which is study and work. So what were the steps that you panelists had to take into your current profession? And I would like to put specific emphasis on any barriers, or any barriers, but also how you took that on. Of course, we all agree that your race, color of your skin can often box you in, but a lot of us, I think, would agree that there is a lot of mindset used to believe whether you are boxed in or whether you don't really believe there is a box, break through and carry on doing what you want to do to get where you want to be regardless. And having the understanding that a lot of young people maybe don't have access to that encouragement, like you said, Mustafa, don't have the role models, do not see themselves in other positions, in great positions, in fields of work where they can break through those barriers, basically. So before I waffle on, can somebody cut me off? One of you panelists maybe speak on that topic.
I'll start.
Thank you.
So just to actually follows on from what I was previously saying, where I talked about Ishango, just to end with Ishango, they closed down because they couldn't sustain the funding that they were getting to exist. So we talked about so the organization is Blastfest, yeah, the organization that I run. But prior to registering Blast as an actual organization, I've been doing this work for, I'd say really since 2010, including myself into this agenda, right? So I've never worked for an organization that does STEM engagement, right? And so one of the things that I recognized through attending a science festival myself, which happened at Aston University, and I lived in the nearest neighborhood, which was Nechells, which if we look at sort of lower social output areas and kind of disadvantage, it's one of, you know, at the top there. And one of the things that I was kind of like amazed and really, really disappointed because there was nothing in the local area where I live to suggest that there was a science festival going on kind of steps away, no advertising or anything whatsoever. And so when I went along and actually tried to encourage, I used to run a parent forum at the time at my children's school, people were very interested in me talking about some of the events that I had gone to. But when I encouraged them and handed out the booklets and encouraged them to come along, as soon as they saw it was at Aston University, they kind of thought, well, that wasn't for me. So I was interested in that. And then also being there, being literally the only Black person in every room that I was in, and really seeing no representation, not just on a kind of ethnic diversity level, but also on a social level. There was nobody from my diverse neighborhood represented here, and neither were the people facilitating the sessions representative. I'm sure there would have been some there, but I didn't see any, right? And so that inspired me through kind of outrage, really, because I'm a rights-based person as well. So, you know, there's lots of reasons why diversity is important, but diversity isn't power, and we need power, empowerment, and yeah, and so my position from that was to get involved, where I initially thought my role would be to kind of nudge the people who were charged with doing this diversity agenda, right? Which has previously been less diverse than the sectors they're trying to diversify when we look at who does science engagement and how it's done, right? So I originally thought mine was about influencing and kind of, you know, trying to help them to be more inclusive. But after a while, I realized actually, I call me selfish, but I want to be alive to see some change, right? And that kind of work may or may never make a massive impact if it's just about helping those who lead already to try and do it a little bit more inclusive. So I felt I need to branch off and do something in a way that I think can really accelerate and kind of, you know, have a concrete invitation to the community that I particularly wanted to engage in, that was missing. And so we started off with an event, and we've had 7 now, called Black STEAM, which is modeled off TED Talks in its format. And it's people in Black people in science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, doing 20-minute talks, about themselves. And they start off with baby pictures, and they take us on this journey, trials and tribulations, but brings us to whatever it is they do, which could be, you know, mathematics or whatever. And it's an intergenerational audience. And the idea is that the village, not just the kids too, but the village can see what has been this individual's enabling environment, how have they negotiated their presence in these spaces, and who's inspired them and all these things, so that we can take that knowledge back through their stories, and think about how we can take on board some of those things and support each other on a grassroots level to try to create these pathways and make them visible to take forward. So I've got lots to say, but I'm going to pause and let somebody else speak.
Thank you for that, Anita. That really links well into something I hope one of you panelists will speak more on, which is, how did you find yourself pushing into these teams, into these boards, into these leaders, when you are maybe the only person of colour to be seen, whether that is as a participant attending events, or whether that is part of boardrooms and organisations? How did that feel? Were you pushing through out of rage? Were you pushing through out of, I want to be there? Or did you have external encouragement? Did you have the enabling environment? If anybody would like to come forward, I think Councillor Leslie.
Yeah, from my perspective, I probably want to say is that when I first became a councillor in 2015, I was a single only, out of 55 councillors, the only single black male there. In 2019, we increased that total by 100% by getting another one. So there's only 2 black men out of out of 55 councillors. Look, it is what it is. I understand the society. I understand that the society is institutionally racist, unfortunately. Those people aren't going to go away. Those people will always be there. But my thing is that I was born here. This is where I grew up, and I will seek to get happiness and fulfillment, not only for myself, but my children and my community who I represent. So we just got to know that it's, if you want to access something and access power in order to change, because you can access power for wrong motives, but you can access power for good motives. And if you want it takes to access power, then you have to push for it. And I think all that's down to mindset. You know that there are continually going to be barriers put into place. And I think it's like, if you don't see role models anywhere, I think you've got to go out and look for those role models. And then once you see that, once you read the right sort of things, once you listen to the right sort of things, once you surround yourself by people who are going to inspire you, sometimes they're not always from your communities, but if you put yourself into that frame and have that determination, you would ultimately get there. But there's one thing I'll probably say with that: you've also got to have the financial backing to be able to do that as well. So economics plays a key role in this, whether that's business or employment. So yeah, and basically that's my quick step into political life. But obviously I've had issues. I've worked in the volunteer community sector before, where I've set up businesses, etc. And yeah, and I think, like say, you have to start something up. You have to be a leader. You have to go ahead and do this. And then basically, once you do that, you'll start seeing other people gravitating to you, wanting advice, wanting support, etc. And that leads on to other things. Doors will continually keep on opening. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Did anybody else have anything to expand on what was said there? Hasmita, please.
I think there's also, so I've been on board since I was 20, slightly by accident when I was 20. I'm not gonna lie, it's just like, this seems like it's cool to do. And then kind of later on it became, and like I'm now kind of putting myself in the rooms where usually I am the only one, out of knowing kind of that at some point that these changes need to happen, and they need to happen from me as well, and like voicing the things that are important to me. But I think there is also this element of, wherever I've been in spaces, I've also been encouraged to be there too and supported. And I think sometimes it can feel, or like, like you recognize yourself or identify yourself as only like, this one person with these protected characteristics, or I think it's like Maria said at the beginning, or, like being the only one of. And then I think in some rooms you do find yourself with like great people that want to support, that want to learn, that want to kind of actually help to build too. And I think as well, it's kind of trying to find spaces where we can do things collaboratively more powerfully too. And I think over the last couple of years, I've been getting a bit more frustrated, especially in kind of like workspaces where like in some of these places we're talking about reaching out to like Black and Asian communities, but no one in this room apart from 1 or 2 people are Black and Asian, and actually trying to shift like how we're talking and how we're doing this work that's different. And I've seen it in like the field of STEM, I've seen it in the field of enterprise, which I'm currently in, like it's repeated. And it's not new, but I think there's also these opportunities, especially with what's been happening more recently, to start embedding kind of frameworks of some right around like cultural intelligence and like different ways of doing this. So actually culture's also brought into this conversation. So it is a big part of how we're accessing, how we're feeling, and who people are responding to. And one other point as well, like I think through this as well, and especially the last couple of years, I've seen loads of great organizations that have started because of Outrage. And it's not like the best driver, but actually there've been amazing things around STEM and STEM enterprises, especially in London, which is currently where I'm focused on, but great organizations like Shapeways, like Foundervine, that have been created by young people who have seen that there isn't this space and have just built it, and it has grown and it's been incredibly powerful. And I think there's also great power in that too. So I think where there weren't many role models about 10 years ago, there are some amazing, beautiful, powerful humans that are like coming through. And I think it's also our collective responsibility, which is like what Anita's been doing as well, just like showcasing and like sharing them, showcasing them to the world to see.
Thank you, Hasmita. Just to pick up on what you said there, it really is important that we collaborate. I think we can all agree that the curriculum and the system that we are in, run by government and institutions, is not going to be for people of colour. And so it's about collaboratively collecting these organizations, people like yourselves that already have a keen interest to inspire people and do the work that needs to be done, be the role models that people need, fill in the gaps where we can't rely on systems to do it for us because it's not really made with in mind that we should progress and we should excel. There is a really key point that someone has put in the chat. I wonder if any of you have anything to say on that. But do we place too much emphasis on the conventional routes to achievement, regardless of what field it is, in terms of A-levels, university, and academia in general? I would actually like to ask, do you think we put too much emphasis on that in the BAME community from your own experiences, or do we not put enough? And is that sometimes why we don't feel as though we can fit into those spaces where we are not represented as much as we should be?
Hi, Ivana. Yes. The thing is, because when we say BAME community, it's so diverse, isn't it? And even inside the different ethnic groups, there are different socioeconomic statuses. The BAME community is incredibly diverse. It's just like when we talk about diversity in the world, there is more diversity in Africa, in genetic diversity, than anywhere else in the world. Because, and it's a bit like the same thing with the BAME term, isn't it? And I think it connects some of the things we said before about access and about opportunities. I think that we don't have, the UK does not have a portfolio of opportunities for people. I don't think that everybody needs to want to go to university. I don't think that everybody needs to follow an academic career. I think that everybody needs to have the access to do that if that's what they, designed internally to do, or if that's what they want to try, even if it's only trying to say, I don't want to do this. And I think that we just don't have this portfolio of opportunities to say, someone can be extremely fulfilled in a field that has got nothing, like a technician. Technician is the backbone of any lab or industry. We don't have clear routes to train technicians, isn't it? Doesn't matter if it's from people that levels that only need GCSEs, or levels that only need A levels, or only the BSc degree. We don't have this, and I think that's why we end up losing so many bright minds. In the way, there are people that are ready to go to a lab or to the field, and they are really not interested they like the science, but they are not interested in the formal training. They are very practical, and it doesn't mean that they are not good scientists, if it makes sense. So I think that we are fighting here, an infrastructural problem, rather than a mentality or cultural problem. And the other thing that just following what Hasmita and the Councillor Leslie mentioned, I think that the other thing as well is that we ask too much from us. We don't have the right to be mediocre. Isn't it something horrendous? If you think that children from other backgrounds, and we are talking a lot about race here, but I think that it happens with the LGBTQIA community as well. They are always trying to exceed and do more and be go above and beyond. And the people that can't do that because of they didn't have the background that supports it, they don't have the resilience. That's something that Mustafa works with to deal with it. I aspire the day that our community can be mediocre, because the fact is, when I say that, it's not because I want people to be lazy or underachieving. It's because the people that are geniuses, and then geniuses in the greatest term, and I think that we've got geniuses here in this panel, they are not considered. No, they are the people. Oh, you see, Hasmita made it, Councillor Leslie made it, Mustafa Sarkar made it, Anita made it, without recognizing that some people are just brilliant. And so we are denied the right of being mediocre, and we are denied the right of being brilliant. And that's with the whole epistemicide and the constant robbery of who we are, I think it comes with it as well. So sorry, I got a bit too passionate. I'm too Latin sometimes, but it's just what do you want? I want the children from BAME communities to have the right to be mediocre, and the ones that are brilliant to have nothing hindering them. That's what I want. That's all.
Can I add something to that? I mean, lots of things. I make notes while you're speaking, and then I don't know which one to choose. But I think that, I don't know about you, Maria, but or anyone else on the panel, but certainly I think it's a known narrative of the idea that, when you're Black, for example, you have to work twice as hard for half as much kind of acknowledgement for what you do. And I think that I see that in regards to the science. So I can't talk about being a scientist because I'm not one. I talk about in the science engagement world. And I think that you see that in that is the narrative across every measure, I think. You know, when I talked earlier on about the parents that I tried to persuade to come with me to the Science Festival back in 2010, you know, their kind of refusal of that's not our space is for me is about people trying to protect their kind of their dignity. You know, who wants to walk into a space when you feel like people are looking down on you? Or, you know, we know about stereotype threat, and we tend to talk about that in relation to maybe student ability and things like that. But, you know, we can all experience stereotype threat where we think that we're being judged on something, that if you make a little mistake, or if you look like you know, if you look in your bag, are you stealing? These are realities, right? That a lot of, you know, we talk about race and ethnicity, but we can think of it as caste, right? Because we know that social class and all these things, these intersections come into it. The approach that we use is called a flipped engagement approach. And that's based on me looking at how the mainstream system, I know obviously there are different people within that, but on a main level, it has been this thing where it's the institution reaches out, whether it's the university or the science museum or whatever it is, after they have, with respect, you know, designed what the project will be. And then ultimately, then they reach out to communities and they have the choice to be takers or leavers of that engagement offer. Nothing wrong with that. But our approach, it starts in the community and it stays in the community. It doesn't come back out. It's not a transaction. It's a regenerative, relational, a relationship. And through a flipped engagement, communities have the ability then to be shapers and leaders of the engagement offer, to provide the, you know, this other pathway. We talk about this two-way need. Well, who initiates the two-way and who receives the invitation from the community? You know, I think that, you know, the power thing is so important for us to examine from every single dimension, because it affects how we relate to each other. I have found it, you know, if I was to choose a song title, Through the Fire, you know, Chaka Khan, for me doing engagement uninvited, right, unincluded, I wasn't part of any kind of inclusion agenda. I put myself in there and said, hang on, this isn't right, this isn't fair. What about the, and you know, getting off and doing it yourself, that has not been easy, right? Because for me, I've experienced the poles are either the help, you're here to help us with our agenda, and we might pay your bus fare and give you some sandwiches, right? Or the threat is this kind of poles, the help or the threat, and that is exhausting. So some of the things that I explained earlier about how people might feel about going into spaces where they cannot see themselves, right? The messenger matters. This hard to reach for who? It depends who's doing the reaching, how they're doing the reaching, and why. What is the motivation, right? And where do the community's motivations, identity, and all these things, where are they tangled in that? I see myself as absolutely part of the community that I'm trying to serve. I'm not helping anyone, we're helping each other. And these ways, these cultural ways are important. So, you know, like where sometimes I feel like you've got to swap a cultural way of being for the way that it's done. And actually the way that it's done doesn't work for everyone. And there needs to be space for different leadership, and including the resources and the space move over for other people to lead their agendas. There's nothing being said now about inclusion and diversity, or whatever we want to call it, that wasn't said 20 years ago when they started Ishango. They knew. The canary in the coal mine knows, right? So this is, it's not new, and it's being co-opted, right? Which is a good, in one hand, I'm not dissing the fact that, you know, kind of everybody wants to do it. That's great. But I'm going to close with this, and then everyone else can speak, right? But it's not new, and people need to look at the assets that already exist in communities and look at how do you facilitate and give share power with what already exists.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Mustafa, yeah, quick, if you wouldn't mind giving a quick response so just that we can squeeze in the last topic, because we are most definitely overrunning and I don't want to take up too much of everybody's evening.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to very quickly talk, you know, the question in relation to the conventional route. I'm not necessarily going to talk about A-levels and university and academia, but I think for me, in terms of convention, and again, Maria mentioned that BAME is a very, very broad term. I'm now here speaking specifically about probably the Asian and the Asian community, I would say that there needs to be more diversity and moving away from convention in terms of what STEM is. Because I think automatically when an Indian Asian thinks of science, the first thing they think about is medicine, becoming a doctor or becoming a nurse. But actually, in terms of the diversity in STEM, I think what Hasmita said about the curiosity around STEM, social sciences, technology, mathematics, physics, chemistry. I think we just need to broaden the conventions around what STEM represents certainly for the Asian and Indian Asian community, and that goes back to peers, that goes back to parents and expectations around that. But that's just my point about conventions. I think broadening what STEM means and the options that STEM can provide, I think that's for me really important. Ultimately, we want people to fulfill their potential in whatever area they're going to go into, not necessarily putting people in a pigeonhole to say that actually a prestigious job is to be a doctor or a prestigious job is to do this. There are so many areas where you can fulfill your potential, not just certain areas. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Thank you for that, Mustafa. And I'd just like to add, because Sophie McCann has just mentioned something that I was going to say on the back of Anita's comment there, which is how often does outreach attempts at diversity feel like tokenism? And I'd just like to mention that with this, obviously a lot of you will be aware the Black Lives Matter movement was booming last year, and a lot of people believe that it started last year, that this problem has only just come about, and now is the time that loads of companies and organizations want to come forward and be like, yeah, we're standing for Black people, da, 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 da. I myself have been approached by people, yeah, we want you to do, and you do have to, as anybody involved in any science engagement, any community engagement at all, you have to use your sense of discernment to know whether that invite is genuine or not. Are they actually there to outreach and help people long term, not for the moment, not to say that, to tick a box. It's to actually develop policy that is long lasting and is going to affect generations forward. And as you said, Anita, not in getting involved, not to help yourself, not to look good, not because you're allowed to bring 3 people in or whatever it is. It's the understanding that you are engaging a whole community of people by coming forward and doing your part wherever you can. And again, I just like to emphasize that is the wider purpose of this webinar today, is for anybody who is here listening to encourage you to work in your own little communities and your own projects, to increase diversity and inclusivity. So let me speed on to our last topic, which is actions. I'm sure loads of you will have loads of input because you're all amazing in your fields of what you do. So what are the necessary practical steps for increasing diversity in STEM? And just as a little prompt, feel free to talk about the institutional intervention, sometimes versus community, local, smaller interventions, which you see as more important, where they need to collaborate. So I can see Councillor Leslie's unmuted, and Maria. So Councillor, and then Maria, if you want to forward.
Yeah, and I think for me is, from say the local authorities' point of view, not specifically around STEM subjects. It's working with FOSAC. Could they do a lot more? Indeed, and that's one of the reasons why I'm there as a local council representative, to see about how much more we can actually give, even we've got financial struggles as it is. So that's organisation, we can do things, but also from a community perspective, I think things what Be Global is doing with the local authority and other partners is basically enhancing and giving the support to people about setting up their own enterprises. People who have been laid off, leaving one career or creating side hustles so that it can generate more income for themselves. To me, that's one of the best routes out, creating your own economic foundation, in a sense, to support what you actually want to do, because money plays and economics plays a key role in all of this. So there's some of the practical things which we're doing through organizations, but and I think continually it has to be from us developing campaigns, working collaboratively, and thinking about how we can influence the system. So obviously we'll be happy to listen to what people want to do and any ideas as a local authority. But also just one thing I'd like to end on is that this is for the wider community, the wider society. You got to understand what benefits one section of the community. And we really like to say what benefits the main community, benefits all the community. This is not us and them. And the classic case of that is that when we left the EU, we made a vote and we decided that, look, the UK is deciding to leave the EU. Months before that, years before that, you had Theresa May going to Africa, doing all sorts of dances, etc., trying to woo African countries because they want to trade with them. So basically, you got to realize that actually it's not just about one party in this. This is actually more than one party, and once those parties come together and collaborate, that's when magic can actually happen. But it has to be on a basis of not a slave master sort of relationship, but an equal relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lizzie. Maria, did you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I'm all for sustainability always, and that there is we need money to do things. People's time is expensive. Doing what we're doing here now is, despite having all the people volunteering their time, there is a structure that allows it to happen. There are people devoted to organize it. It should be expensive, and I think that's something that we see with initiatives that are inclusive in STEM, when it comes to science, but beyond as well, is the lack of how precarious they are. So it's a bit like depends how things are economically. So I think that's an exercise for us. How can we ensure the sustainability of initiatives like these, initiatives like FOSAC, initiatives like Ignite, initiatives like BlastFest, what we can do? Because I think that what we need to realize as well, and nobody's going to do anything for us, or not for us, no, for the good of the society, because they are nice, because it's a fair, it's a fair thing to do, because it's to address injustices, to bring justice. I'm sorry, maybe I'm cynical. I don't believe in this, because, just like you said, Havana, are the people that, oh, Black Lives Matter, it's so cool now, I'm so woke and I'm going to work with you. And actually, there'll be another wave that they are going to embark on. And we are the ones here, constantly. And then it's weathering, it's tiring, because it's always the same. So how can, and Anita Hasmita mentioned this, how can we make these efforts sustainable? How can we change the narrative, just like Councillor Leslie said, and make it about the growth of society? The BAME community, the Black and Asian community in this country is growing exponentially. It's not going to be, it's the very sustainability of the country to address these things. And it's going to allow us to reach discoveries more easily, but also, if the grassroots side, the early years, you can promote so many activities, the engagement, you can, include, promote jobs, people, you can make a whole economy out of it. So how can we do that together? And I think that because it's so precarious, because we do that, as a almost like a hobby, you know, we can't afford working 40 hours a week on it, isn't it? We need to be able to pay people to do that. And I think that these 3 organizations that I cited that are here represented, and many, many more, we need to, you know, professionalize and take the burden of the precarity. So allow people to think and to promote strategies that are going to change the situation. Sorry, it's not exactly about the early, and I think that, you know, it's everything from, you know, from cradle to grave. I think that science needs to be offered in different aspects to people to use it as they see fit.
Thank you, Maria. Did anybody else have anything to add on to that, or want to talk about their contributions to science engagement? I know you've all contributed quite a lot, but is there anything else that you'd like to say before I open up for questions from the audience? Hasmita, can I see you?
Yeah, I think it's just a quick thing as well. So in terms of, I think I need to touch upon this previously, it's also about having kind of safe spaces. So like, you know, these things have been said, they've been said for as long as I've been working in this industry, they've been said for much longer. And actually, how are we creating safe spaces so when we're saying these things, or when people of different ethnicities, backgrounds are saying these things, that they don't fall on deaf ears, or they don't get, like, people don't get defensive. And I think from a lot of the things that I've seen when we've, like, some of these things have been broached, it's like, what are we not doing? And it's just like, how can these things then be done better? So like, and how, and I think within this there is this like openness of, and then maybe it's slightly less actionable, but like, you know, there is this bit of like, how truly open and receptive is everyone going to be having these conversations to move this change and listen to it, so it isn't just, as you said, like something that's happening in the short term because there's been a movement on it more recently. So that was a slightly fluffy way of just saying that, yeah, collaboration is definitely key, but also openness and having safe spaces is also a huge part in this.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I was going to completely skipped my mind now. Anything else that somebody would say? I had some, oh, Anita, quickly.
That's okay, I know I've been hogging time. To build on what Maria and Hamita said as well around, you know, I think the way funding is distributed is a major player in the inequality in terms of who gets to do this work. I think in between project funding, for BLAST, for example, the main funders of BLAST are the Black women who carry it, because they give we give our time mostly for free in between the bits that are paid for from projects. So that core infrastructure, because there are 2 agendas, there's the praying work, as my dad would call it, and then there's the building work. So the learning how to work together, negotiate and work together collaboratively, and then there's needing to build what needs to exist, and they're kind of 2 connected areas. And the STEM ecosystem is not just about STEM professionals. There are all sorts of people in that, and I think that certain groups are excluded from the whole ecosystem, from arts to who builds the exhibitions and things like that. So there's so many other professions involved in this that you also see the lack of representation, and we need to look at it from a systems ecosystem perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I've remembered what I was going to say. A key message I'm hearing here is that with all the programs that are created from different communities, and as well as organizations, you know, such as the council, I think what needs to happen a lot of the time is reviewing. So there might be a campaign that is going forward, and it could be, it was designed by somebody working in the community, it went bottom up and went to the council, worked for a little bit, funding got cut, and nothing came in to replace it. Nothing reviewed to say, how did that work? Who did it actually outreach? What evidence have we got to say this actually led to the development of the community that we were meant to engage with? And when you fail to do that, the money never comes in to then forward the development. And this is why I think we've been having this conversation for definitely my lifetime and my parents' lifetime and my grandparents' lifetime. And we do need to nip it in the bud bit by bit and create that collaboration so that we stop going back over things that are clearly working but not having the longevity that is really required. So I haven't got any more questions in the chat, but I did have one for Maria when you were doing your keynote speech. I don't know if you can answer this now. The question is, do you see a link between ethical science, including science communication, and diversity in science?
Yes, of course. We want to, if you know, the revolution is to put things right, isn't it? And I think that being ethical it goes without saying. My daughter, she's doing philosophy of sciences, and there's something that is the wishful discourse, and how science, you know, how scientists can weaponize what they say to push an agenda. And it's not our job. It's our job to do things well and to say the truth, and not to move things to fit what we an agenda. So I think that we want to believe that with more diversity, there will, you know, we are going to have an environment that's more inquisitive as well, and that controls itself in a more productive way. So it's not an old boys club; it's everyone's club where everyone can share the issues with different practices, and because it's all about, as I said before, for me at least, it's all about sustainability. It's all about living better, more prosperous lives. So yeah, I think there's a big link.
Thank you. So just to finish off, I would love if panelists, you could mention one action in 5 words, because I know you guys can give so much to us. In 5 words, could you say one action that you think is necessary to increase diversity in STEM? I will give you some time to think about exactly what that would be. And I'm just going to recap on some great things that I picked up that you said today. So, Maria, you said the best form of activism is being where we're not supposed to be, which I think is really encouraging. Anita, you've said that people need to see themselves, be themselves, and become themselves. So it's all about having the exposure and the opportunity, but also supporting a person as they delve into whatever career, whatever passion, whatever success looks like to them. We've also had people are not interested in events that are maybe in intimidating environments. So maybe we need to go more into the community and work with faces and people that they would feel more comfortable to speak with. As you said, Hasmita, to have the safe spaces that people can feel listened to, and where they feel as though their voice is going to be of benefit to them to even speak up and to even action on anything that they desire. And that we need to have intergenerational audiences. Here today, we have all of you that have worked with young people, and I myself am still in university, but it's for everyone to get involved and for us to understand that it is a community we need to build diversity and inclusivity in whatever sector, but particularly in STEM. And it's not for us to only go to the young person and say, look, here's this brilliant career, but it's to work with the entire generation, all generations that we have in the world, because they also need to keep up with what the organizations are doing. It can't just be they go to one event, they hear something great, they go home, and you think a young person's going to be like, yeah, okay, that's it, my life's set now, I'm going to be super successful, I have all the motivation in the world. They need that constant reminder, role models, as you've said, Mustafa, to keep them going. So 5 words, the actions. I'm going to start with Councillor Leslie. What would you say those need to be?
5 words. I mean, it's quite a hard task, but I'll give it a shot. Well, basically, I think one is economics. Build your own economic base. 2, I'll say politics, because politics and business do go hand in hand. Clear example is that is one political party, they would get into power and then give their friends certain contracts, etc. It's not the way to go, but there is a linkage between politics and economics. The legal field, none of what we can do can't operate without having a legal framework in place. 2, the 4th one I would say is education, because we got to understand that, especially with the STEM subjects, is encouraging people to go into those high growth sectors. I know Maria spoke about mediocrity in the past. My dad wouldn't accept mediocrity, so we're forced, especially in African cultures, but we have to be excellent in everything we do, and sometimes that does play into our advantage when living here in the West. But education is definitely key in getting into those high growth industries, but also media as well, having links and connections with people in the media, because if we don't control our own narrative, other people will control it for us. I think this we're fine. So all of those, I would say, it's all about coordination. How do we coordinate? How do we link together to create the future for ourselves and our families?
Thank you, Councillor. Mustafa, if you wouldn't mind going next.
So yeah, I guess the 5 words I've jotted down are role models as one. I'm taking this actually from one of the chat comments from Andre. I think he's mentioned practical steps, and he used the word connection, which I thought was a really nice word. So I've got role models, connection, and then sense of community. Those are probably the three areas I would probably look at.
Thank you. And Maria?
I've already said that I'm a big fan of the initiatives that are represented here today and the organizers of this fantastic panel. So I think that what they are doing is great. But I'm going to, because I'm obsessed. The Latin thing. I'm obsessed with excelling science. I think that it's one of the many things we can do, together with FOSAC, with Ignite, with Blastfest, and other organizations in this space of bringing STEM to everyone. I would say 5 words: roll out, excel in science. And if you want to learn more, talk to Sarah Zay, that is in the audience, is better than me, because to talk about, she's going to be more objective. But I think that it's one of the many things that we can do to change this situation.
Thank you. Anita, in 5 words.
That sounds like a warning.
It's not a warning at all.
I think all right, 6 words: out the center, into the circle with the rest of us. That's about decentering the system, out the center, into the circle with the rest of us. Let's do it together.
And Hasmita.
And you should have ended it with Anita. Like, that would have been a better. I think I kind of have narrowed it down to 2. So one is motivation, and for all of us to understand actually, what's the motivation for doing the work, and when people are doing outreach, what is the motivation that you're doing it, and why, and also what else then do you need to ensure that this work is done, and it's not even work, that you're serving the people that you want to serve in the best way. And then the other part is about curiosity and wonder. And I say this in particular of, like in a lot of like the cultural background that I was brought up in, where, science is fact. It's not something that you play with. It's not something you have fun with. It's something that you learn. And actually really kind of having fun and playing and being curious and promoting that way of doing science and STEM.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that is the end of our panel discussion today. Thank you so much, panelists. As a clap to yourself. It's a bit weird. If we were in a room, we could hear the clap. Now it's just like a weird one person clap. It doesn't have the same effect. But at some point, we'll hopefully be able to have these sort of events in person. I think these online webinars are good and bad. It interrupts the social interaction, but we also have people, hopefully from all over the country, that maybe wouldn't be able to attend today. So thank you for attending. If you'd like to put any of your contact details in the chat box for attendees to get in touch with you, I've introduced all the panelists with some of their specialties and organizations that they're already working on. So please, please, please type it into Google, type it into social media, get involved with what they're doing, because I think we all agree collaboration here is what we need, most importantly. If there's nothing else we'd like to say, Megan or Rick, would you like to say anything?
Well, I'd only like to just echo the thanks to you all for your contributions. It's so insightful and so inspiring, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this will inspire action and change. So thank you again for taking part.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks to you, Havana, for chairing so fabulously, and for all of our panelists for joining, and for everybody in the audience for joining as well. I think this is not the end of anything at all. I think I've got so many notes, and I think we'll be following up. So this is a conversation that we will be continuing, and watch this space.
Okay, thank you very much, Megan and Rick, panelists, attendees. Have a lovely evening. I hope you've learnt loads, been inspired by wise words, and this is not the end.
Havana, I just need to say that, your present, despite all the things, changing, I wish I had your confidence at your age, it was really, 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 it was a delight to watch and see how you conducted. And, I think that Mustafa left, maybe, I don't know if he's still here. He's here, yeah. Just to thank the panelists. I've learned so much with all of you, and I hope that through Megan and Rick, we can all keep collaborating.
Thank you. And just to add to that, Maria, I know, thank you for the compliment. I really do appreciate it. But there are tons of young people as inspired and confident and brave as you may call myself. And we actually are having a youth conference later this year, and the theme is motivation. If any of you can attend, I think it would be brilliant to have your insight and just see exactly what can be done when a young person sticks with it and does motivate people and gets them just to believe that they can actually make a change and they actually matter. Us young people are the future, but we are nothing without brilliant people like yourselves paving the way, and always reminding us that we do need to keep motivated. It's not something that will happen overnight. And none of the things we've spoken about are quick fixes. It's going to take some work, but it definitely can be done. So thank you again, everyone, and have a lovely evening.